Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. So today we are really facing the digital media is in transformation. And all the marketers, advertisers are trying their ways to figure out how to bring their communication effective in every media environment. And native advertising is absolutely one of the emerging trends that is getting lots and lots attention, but yet the industry doesn't yet have a consistent view in terms of what really native advertising is, and also how do we go about making it effective for all the advertisers. So Yahoo and Wharton joined hands since last year, working together with the thought leaders in the industry and practitioners together. And Professor later is going to introduce a framework so that we can help the whole industry. We can look at how do we make these emerging trends, native advertising, effective for your business. So first, let me start it off to talking about how we look at this from Yahoo. The advertising, certainly all the pay advertisers are fighting for users' attention. But a lot of times we use the intrusive advertising format. If it's not done well, it actually can be disfranchising your user base. And where this whole industry is really trying to figure out how do we immerse the sponsored content into the media consumption that the user are actually happening, no matter on what the device, and in a way that can actually make it contextually relevant so that for both media and the brand and the user can all benefit. So when the ads are actually personal, when the ads are actually relevant, it works better, and it works better for the advertisers. It increases the engagement and encourages the user to come back more. So that also helps the publisher, and not to mention, that's overall win for everybody. That's really what we see the big distinction and the benefit when more and more advertisers started to try to figure out how to utilize native advertising to communicate with their users. So native advertising absolutely is growing because when it's done right, it can be very effective. So 63% of the brands actually feel native advertising can increase consumers' engagement because it's oftentimes not the case with a lot of advertising. It's very hard to actually get users to engage with the content coming from advertisers. But when it's done right, and of course that's the topic of the framework, how do we get it right? And also 53% of the people who actually viewed native advertising can respond more favorably than traditional advertising. And as a result, even as of last year, we already saw 44% increase of advertising spend on social media native advertising format. So it's absolutely growing. So, but the industry, or generally speaking, a lot of people have different views about what native advertising is. So what is native? So I kind of like this visual. The tree branch, you kind of see a little bug in there, hidden in there. You're not like spotting the bug, but what it really does is actually allows the bug to actually do a better job at kind of grabbing the food or to be able to survive better in this environment. So that is pretty much the concept when we embedded native advertising into the right content and the environment. Native ads actually is not a new concept. It has been a primary form for search advertising for all those years. But now there's a wider adoption of native advertising in broader types of content. So certainly you can see native ads in the form of search advertising. Also more and more in-stream advertising. So when you're consuming content, the example on the left, you can see on the Yahoo streams, you will be able to consume content at the same time to have a personalized advertising also showing in the streams. Also, there's a sponsored tweets. And also, when you are kind of scrolling on the slideshows of a celebrity, it will be very natural to actually see a Chanel advertising in between. You can also show as a way of sponsored posts. Or, like if you are follow fashion or you follow a certain lifestyle category in Tumblr, you can actually see advertising that just blends in very well with the environment, with the interest that the people are focusing on. And of course, it's not limited to PC, the beauty of which is really has to go against any device in any circumstances that the user are consuming the content. And sponsor posts on mobile, and also sponsor content. It can be a shorter type of content. It could also be like a brand post. It could also be in a format of video. So all these formats exist, and as long as there is editorial environment, there's a media environment, there can be a suitable way for native advertisers to be featured. More examples, like the magazine type of advertising on Yahoo. But we all know, really for native ads to work, it's not just the format. It's what content the advertiser put forward. And it has to be presented in a very relevant, contextually relevant or emotionally relevant environment for that advertising to truly work. And we understand, as Yahoo is the biggest biggest publisher on the web, we understand the challenges and the requirements for brands or to create content on the web. So we've continued to hear a lot of challenges shared by our customers. Most of the brands are not publishers. They really don't have the skills or the know-how or the expertise to continue to create engaging content. So that really is a challenge number one. And they also don't have a suitable tools for them to do that easily. Also, once they create a content, they distribute in their own fan pages, in their own official websites. So the distribution is very limited. So it's not scalable. And also, it's very hard to measure the effort that they're putting, what is the ROI. So the way Yahoo really looks at how do we provide a total suite of solutions to help advertisers to address the broader question of the content marketing. Certainly native advertising is a part of that. With our editorial experience, Yahoo is able to work with clients to help them create content. Also, we could provide the branded environment as almost like a canvas to help the advertisers to put their content in a relevant environment. And also, which is very important, is the personalization, because the content has to be shown in the right place at the right time to the right users. So the personalization engine that Yahoo developed not only power our own content, but also can help advertisers to personalize their messages to the user. And also, Yahoo is beginning to open our own editorial garden, so to speak, to start viewing content from sponsored advertisers in the same way coming from editorial publishers. So the advertisers can actually get organic distribution on Yahoo in the future. And of course, it can be amplified by paid advertising. And ultimately, the advertising can be measured and the effect can be measured by looking at its ROI. So this is the way that we help advertisers from the content creation to content distribution, no matter organic or paid, earned or paid, ultimately to the measurement. And that is the journey we'll continue to develop our solutions to help advertising on. So basically what it does really is to marry the publisher content, Yahoo content, together with the advertisers. One example, we just recently had this with Splenda, is Splenda can publish its content through Tumblr with a very rich expression for their brand. And also that Tumblr information and that content can also be distributed on Yahoo through a very contextually relevant onto the strings. So this is organic earned media as that content get exposed on the Yahoo network. And furthermore, the advertiser also distribute that with a relevant advertising of a native advertising format to help amplifying that message. So more and more of those examples were helping advertisers to address the content side with the simple tools, such as a publisher system from Tumblr. And also, the advertiser and the consumer absolutely see when it's done right, actually user can see, these, they actually pay more attention to the sponsored content than editorial content. And also, from Yahoo eye tracking study, because of the relevance in the environment and the relevant content, actually user see the advertising more before anything else. That gives you really great traction for the users. And also very, very important, especially in the mobile environment, we've seen most of the native advertising can work better in a much better way. So example is like the click-through rate can be 3 or 4 times better than conventional display advertising. So this is all great, and we absolutely see more and more interest of advertisers and requesting and trying to get into native advertising. So how do we help? And then how do we help the industry to actually look at how to go about doing it, and what is the framework to make it really effective? And that's where we have worked with Wharton. So Professor Wind has led this project in the past year. So he's here to share with us what are the framework.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you.
Thanks. So primarily what we'd like to do is present to you a framework that we believe everyone here can start using to try to get more out of native advertising. It's primarily designed to address some of the issues that Rose indicated, like blurring the line between advertising and content, ineffective integration of content with the context that you're dealing with, the measurement issue, and the stakeholder agreement on the ultimate objective. And stakeholder will include the brand, the media, the audience, and ideally even society. So primarily what we are proposing is a framework that has 3 components. One is how do you align the objective of the different players? How do you create effective integration? And a very important third component, how do you assure the transparency of what we're dealing with? So let's start with the integration. So the key to the integration is a model that we developed actually before we even started the collaboration with Yahoo as part of our Future of Advertising program that suggests that to engage consumers effectively, what you need is you have to follow the RAVES model. And RAVE stands for respectful of the audience, as opposed to just pushing ads at them. At the same time, also being relevant and timely. The A stands for actionable. The V for valuable, both in terms of cognitively, but also emotionally. The experiential stands for E. And the S is a surprising story. So not just any story, but has to be surprised. And we found out that if you're trying to get audiences to share the content, the ads with others, it has to have some surprise element to it. So that's the RAVES model that primarily can apply to any communication, any marketing activity you're doing. And the important aspect about this, it has to be delivered through all touch points. So it's not just traditional media, but primarily all touch points. Product design, package design, retail environment. So you're trying to deliver the RAVES kind of communication through all areas. So the question is, how do we translate this to natives? How do we really, if we're saying that the RAVES model that we discussed here is primarily what we're trying to accomplish, how do we do it? We suggest here primarily, Nad will give you one other acronym here, that important is the manner, the kind of look and feel of what we're dealing with, the audience, the mood and context of the audience. We're trying to deal with the device fit, very important. Are you dealing with smartphone? Are you dealing with tablet, with a PC? Or think about today's development, Google Glasses, wearable computing, any device that you're dealing with, and the editorial fit. So think about this as MADE, the M-A-D-E, And primarily, we're focusing on made for raves. So if we're trying to get effective integration, we'd like to make sure that we are following both the raves in terms of the respectful, relevant, actionable, experiential, and surprising story of the message and delivering it effectively through made. So the manner of presentation, there are tons of examples that I'm sure you're all familiar with. In any one of these forms. The audience is extremely important to understand when we talk about native advertising, that we're not only fitting the ad in the context of the editorial context, but also the context of the audience. Are they watching it by themselves? What is their mood? What is the occasion they're viewing the ad? And very important in this respect is customization. And this was actually one of the reasons we partnered with Yahoo, because of the personalization engine they have that we felt would allow us to really experiment effectively with this. And then the devices, including also, kind of out-of-home devices that you can have, any type of screen or even wearable computer that consumers can have. And as you all know, obviously, the content and context of the editorial environment that is presented. So that's basically the effective integration of the advertising. So now we're coming to the second dimension, which is transparency. Transparency is critical. And there are many, many ways today to deal with transparency. You have sponsored content, you have BuzzFeed partner, you have ad choices, you have just ad, you have recommended, you have SAP voices, you have promoted, you're promoted by. Variety of ways of presenting primarily the sponsorship. The challenge, however, is critics such as Bob Garfield, who claims primarily native advertising is effective only when deceptive. And he supports it with research. Research are showing that advertisement on digital platforms were found to be misleading by, imagine the numbers, 45% of those seen on Twitter, 57% those seen on Facebook, 86% those seen on sponsored video ads. And other studies that talk about that up to 35% of consumers in groups basically could not identify an advertisement even when it's said on its advertisements. So you're dealing with a real issue here. And we basically believe that it's absolutely critical that we develop a very clear way of transparency in which consumers clearly perceive the ad as basically the native ad that we create as being paid advertising. And when we start thinking about guidelines, there are definitely guidelines from other industries we can think about. In pharmaceutical industry, when they came up with the physician payment sunshine ad, they actually saw that, which primarily implies that they have to be transparent when physicians are being paid for endorsement and the like. We saw actually decrease in branded drug prescription sales. And but there are also examples where it did not work. In the tobacco industry, when they came up with the label on the cigarette, on the packages, had no effect at all on reducing smoking. From our point of view, when we're thinking about transparency, we don't want you to think only on the negative side. Think about it also in terms of how can we leverage the power of the brand. Companies such as IBM has enormous credibility when it comes to technology, cloud, and some of the other areas. Why not leverage it? When we talk about pet food, pedigree, have an enormous amount of credibility, probably more than any of the media. So why is this the assumption always that the media, the editorial content is more credible than the messages coming from the brand? Be proud of the brand, present the thought leadership, encourage the brand to take thought leadership position here. And primarily, if you do it effectively, you'll get basically the virtuous circle here, that primarily will suggest to be if we are overt and we're basically totally open with the audience in terms of what we're doing, it will lead us to kind of the virtuous cycle toward a much longer term effectiveness for the brand. Might be at some short-term loss, but primarily long-term and we have to think about the long term, this is the way to go. In contrast, if we're basically kind of providing almost what we might call here a native light, when there is significant deception and consumers don't recognize that this is an ad, long term, this might lead to loss of credibility and be disastrous for the brands. And we're basically suggesting that deception is clearly unethical and unacceptable. It can result in loss of credibility. It may bring the regulatory hammer here, and it's definitely not what we would like to kind of see happen. So the question is, how do we move forward and how do we implement the framework we have? When we take into account that there are different players here, and they have different objectives here, and primarily would like to do is to make sure that we are aligning the interest of all our players through our made for raves kind of framework here. Now, there are numerous examples out there. One that we thought is quite compelling is the example of the Marriott Travel Brilliantly that really addressed the audience because they perceive travel tips and learn about experience amenities. The media properties can provide relevant and valuable content. The advertiser can signal that they are more innovative and focus on customer service, and even society can benefit through sustainability and others. And that's a topic which is increasingly important in the sense, what is your contribution to society? Especially the millennials are really looking for beyond just the kind of the brand. Now, how do we implement it? And the implementation is primarily what we're suggesting is a key element to our framework is through adaptive experimentation and meta-analysis. Now, let me spend a minute on experimentation. Imagine that you were spending X millions of dollars on some advertising and you got these results. The question is at the end of the year, what should you do next? What should you do next year? Should you increase the advertising, decrease, or stay the same level? The answer is you don't know. And regardless what type of modeling you're going to use, you really do not know the answer. And when you reflect on this, it means that primarily you wasted a year. That basically at the end of the year, you're no smarter you were at the beginning of the year. The only way to know will be design an experiment where let's say you change it to, in some markets you'll have 2x, in some you'll have x, some half x. If these are the results, continue with x next year and perhaps experiment with some other variables. If these are the results, continue with 3 or 4x. If these are the results, try perhaps 3x and perhaps a quarter x. But you don't have to limit this to a single dimension. You can experiment with a number of things, with the content, the dollars, and others. Experimentation is absolutely key. It will provide you the only way to learn what is the real impact. It will allow you primarily to experiment with innovative new initiatives. It will create a culture of experimentation, culture of innovation. Because the minute, in most companies, I would argue, you are risk averse. And the minute you start experimenting, you send a message to everyone in the organization, it's okay to fail. Because everyone knows that not every experiment will succeed. And you create then a culture of innovation. So our recommendation primarily here is that what we want to do is we want to start experimenting with different components of the model. So this will be experimentation that focuses on the the manner, the audience, the device, the editorial, again, different approaches for transparency for any given objective. We're doing now experiments along this line together with Bloomberg in the US. And we would really like to encourage everyone in the audience here to join Yahoo here and us and start experimenting with different aspects of the framework. So ideally, if we basically accept the model we discussed here, that native advertising is key for effective integration with overt transparency that will allow us to align the objectives of the different audiences here, the audience, the media, the brand, and society. Adaptive experimentation is our solution here. And that's basically the simple framework we discussed. And ideally, you'll be able not to kill the golden goose here, but if you are introducing effectiveness and transparency in everything you do following our model, if you implement it through adaptive experimentation, and follow our model here, we believe you'll be able to be by far better off, increase the effectiveness and value of native advertising to all involved. Thank you very much.